"May I have your leftovers, sir?" But when the millionaire looked into her eyes, a miracle happened. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Emily stood in the cold, wet snow, her coat barely able to keep the biting chill from reaching her bones. The train station was nearly deserted, the only sound being the occasional rumble of distant trains and the soft tap of her boots against the icy platform. She had missed her morning interview due to a delay, and now, she was stuck at the station with no money for food or a way to get back home. Her stomach growled, reminding her of the harsh reality she was living in. As she looked down at the crumpled $10 bill in her pocket, it was clear she had no choice but to try to make it stretch for the rest of the day. The weight of her financial troubles was heavy on her shoulders. She had been struggling for months after losing her job, and every day felt like a battle to just make it through. Just as she was about to sit on a bench and try to figure out her next move, a man walked into her line of sight. He was tall, dressed in a black suit that looked far too expensive for a place like this, and he looked out of place in the bustling station. His expression was a mixture of frustration and exhaustion, as if he had been here longer than he wanted to be. The man walked past her, and Emily couldn't help but notice how cold he looked, his jacket soaked from the snow. She hesitated for a moment, then, despite her own troubles, she stood up and walked over to him. "Excuse me," she said softly, "are you all right?" The man turned to face her, a slight frown on his face. He looked at her with confusion, then recognition, as if something about her seemed familiar. "I'm fine," he said curtly, his voice low. Emily hesitated, unsure if she should press further. But something about him told her that he wasn't as fine as he claimed. "I noticed you're cold," she said gently, taking a deep breath. "You can have my sandwich, if you want. It's all I have left, but you look like you could use it more than I do." The man stared at her, eyes wide in disbelief. "You want to give me your leftovers?" he asked incredulously. Emily smiled weakly. "I don't mind. I'd rather not see someone go hungry, especially not in this weather." The man blinked, clearly taken aback by her kindness. "That's very kind of you," he said quietly, before taking the sandwich from her. They stood there for a moment, the snow falling gently around them, neither knowing what to say next. "I don't know what to say," the man finally spoke, looking into her eyes. "Thank you." His voice was softer now, as if something about her simple act of kindness had caught him off guard. As he looked at her, a strange sensation swept through him. There was something about her that seemed different. Something he couldn't quite place. He had always been surrounded by people who wanted something from him. But this woman, this stranger, had given him something without expecting anything in return. That small act of kindness was enough to change both of their lives in ways they could never have imagined. This was only the beginning. The man's hand trembled slightly as he took the sandwich from Emily, his fingers brushing against hers. It was such a simple gesture, but there was something in the way their hands met that made his heart race. He didn't know why, but he felt a connection. Emily, standing in front of him, her eyes full of kindness, seemed so different from the people he was used to. She was not after anything. She was just kind. It felt like a lifetime ago when he had known what that kind of kindness was like. He had once been that way, full of compassion and hope. But somewhere along the path of his life, he had lost that part of himself. He hadn't expected this to happen, not here, not now, not with someone like her. But there it was. He took a deep breath, trying to shake the feeling that something had shifted within him. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice softer than before. "You really don't." Emily smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "It's nothing, really," she replied. "I'm just trying to get by. I understand what it feels like to be struggling." The man looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. She was young, maybe in her 20s, but there was a depth to her that made him think she had seen more than her fair share of hardship. Her clothes weren't fancy, and she didn't have the kind of polished look people expected in a place like this. But there was a warmth about her, something genuine that radiated from her every movement. "I'm sorry," he said, feeling awkward. "I don't even know your name." "Emily," she answered, her voice still warm. "And you are?" The man hesitated. For a moment, he was tempted to tell her the truth. But then he thought better of it. She didn't need to know who he was. Not now. "Just call me Miles," he said, smiling faintly. "Nice to meet you, Miles," she said, her tone light, but there was a sincerity in her words. "It's nice to meet you too, Emily," he replied. They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of the falling snow the only thing breaking the quiet. It was a strange kind of peace, the kind that only comes from shared moments of understanding. Emily shifted her weight, her eyes scanning the station. She had been hoping for a fresh start, but everything had been falling apart around her. The job interview she had missed was crucial to her future, and now she wasn't sure what her next move was. She couldn't even afford the bus fare to get home. "So, what brings you to the train station, Emily?" Miles asked, breaking the silence. She let out a small sigh, her eyes lowering. "I had an interview this morning," she said, "but I missed it. My bus was delayed, and now—" She trailed off, her voice tinged with frustration. "I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what to do next." "That's rough," Miles said, nodding sympathetically. "What kind of job were you interviewing for?" Emily looked up at him, surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. "I was hoping to get a position as an assistant at a local art gallery," she said, her voice softening. "But now, I don't know if I'll even get another chance." Miles studied her carefully. There was something about the way she spoke, so open, so vulnerable, that made him feel protective, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He had been too wrapped up in his own world for far too long, and now, standing here, he realized just how much he missed human connection. "Well, maybe the universe is telling you to keep going," Miles said, offering her a small smile. "You never know what opportunities are out there." Emily chuckled softly. "I wish I had your optimism. Things just seem so hard right now." "I get it," Miles said quietly. "But sometimes, the hardest things lead to the best things." Emily tilted her head, looking at him curiously. "Do you really believe that?" she asked. He nodded, a small but genuine smile on his face. "Yeah. I do." Emily paused for a moment, taking in his words. She hadn't expected to find comfort in a stranger at the train station, but for some reason, it felt like this moment might just be the turning point she had been waiting for. It was then that she noticed something unusual. There was a glint in Miles's eyes. It was as though something had shifted in him too. "Miles," she began, her voice hesitant, "I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I just feel like you're different. There's something about you." He gave a soft laugh, almost as if he was surprised by her words. "I don't know about that," he said, looking away briefly. "I'm just a guy trying to get by." "Maybe," Emily said with a small grin, "but everyone's got a story, right?" Miles smiled back, feeling something stir within him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like someone cared enough to listen. But as much as he wanted to open up, he knew he couldn't, at least, not yet. He didn't know if he was ready to let anyone in again. "Maybe," he said quietly, looking at her. "Maybe everyone does." The silence between them was comfortable, but the weight of unspoken words hung in the air. Emily didn't press him further, sensing that he wasn't ready to share more. "Well," she said after a pause, "thank you for the sandwich. You really didn't have to, but I appreciate it." "It was nothing," Miles replied with a shrug. "It's the least I could do." Emily nodded, then glanced toward the exit. "I should probably get going. I don't want to miss the last train." "Yeah, me too," Miles said, standing up. As they said their goodbyes, Emily felt a strange sense of relief. Something about the encounter with Miles had given her hope. It was as though, for the first time in a long while, she wasn't alone in her struggle. Emily stepped off the train, the cool evening air hitting her face as she walked through the bustling station. She had made it, just in time for the last train of the day. The thought of going back to her small apartment and dealing with the mounting bills made her stomach churn. She had no idea how she was going to pay for anything, let alone her rent, which was already overdue. But as she walked through the crowded station, her mind kept drifting back to the moment she had shared with Miles. It had been brief, just a simple exchange, but something about it had felt different. For the first time in what felt like ages, she felt seen. As she passed the rows of people, her eyes caught sight of a man sitting in the corner by the cafe, reading a newspaper. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Miles. She hadn't expected to see him again, and certainly not so soon. He looked up from his paper and, as if sensing her gaze, his eyes locked onto hers. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips, and he stood up as she approached. "Emily," he said, his voice a bit surprised but warm. "I didn't think I'd run into you again." "Miles," Emily replied, her heart racing a little. "I didn't expect to see you here either." Miles took a step closer, glancing around as if to make sure no one was watching. "I was actually hoping I'd see you again," he admitted, a bit sheepishly. "I wanted to thank you properly for the sandwich, but it seems like you're in a hurry." Emily blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected this. "Thank you?" "You don't have to do that," she said, shaking her head. "I was just trying to help." "No. I want to." "You've got no idea how much that small gesture meant to me," Miles said, his eyes softening. "Maybe we could grab a coffee sometime? Just to talk." Emily hesitated for a moment, but something about the sincerity in his voice made her nod. "Okay, sure," she said, smiling. "I'd like that." They walked to a nearby coffee shop, the warmth of the place a welcome relief from the chill of the night air. They found a small corner booth, away from the rest of the crowd. Miles ordered 2 coffees, his usual confident demeanor slowly slipping away as he sat down across from Emily. He seemed almost nervous. It was strange, considering how he had carried himself earlier. Emily noticed the change in his attitude, and it made her feel more at ease. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping their drinks before Emily spoke up. "So," she began, "what's your story, Miles? I mean, you don't look like you spend much time in places like that train station." Miles chuckled softly, his eyes briefly flickering to the window as if contemplating how much to say. "You're right. I don't usually," he said slowly. "But I've been trying to learn something about the people who don't have what I do." Emily raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I'm not who I appear to be," Miles said, his voice dropping to a quieter tone. "I come from a lot of money, Emily. And for a long time, I didn't understand what it was like to struggle. But I've been trying to change that. Trying to see things from a different perspective, you know." Emily's eyes widened, the realization dawning on her. The man who had seemed so genuine and humble was, in fact, the kind of person she had always been taught to stay away from, the wealthy elite. The people who never had to worry about their next meal or the bills piling up. But as she looked at him now, she couldn't see him as just another rich guy. He wasn't like the others. "You've been trying to experience what it's like to be like me?" she asked cautiously, trying to process what he was saying. Miles nodded, his expression earnest. "Yeah. I know it sounds crazy, but I wanted to see if I could understand. To truly understand what it means. To live without the luxury of choice. To see if there was more to life than just having everything handed to me." Emily didn't know what to say. She had spent most of her life working hard just to stay afloat, and now this man, who had the world at his fingertips, was trying to walk in her shoes. It was hard to wrap her head around. "I don't know," she said, shaking her head slightly. "I mean, it's not like you can really understand, right?" You can pretend to be like us for a while, but in the end, you'll always have your money to fall back on. People like me, we don't have that luxury. Miles looked at her, his eyes intense. I get that, he said quietly. And I don't expect you to believe me. But I want to try. I want to show you that I'm not just another guy who has everything. I want to do something real. I don't know if that makes sense, but he trailed off, clearly unsure of how to continue. Emily sat back, taking a deep breath. She had never met anyone like Miles before. She had always thought of rich people as out of touch, disconnected from the struggles of everyday life. But Miles was different. There was something about him that made her believe that he genuinely wanted to change. She just wasn't sure if she was ready to trust him yet. You're not like the others, Emily said quietly, her voice filled with hesitation. But that doesn't mean I can just forget everything I've been through. Or that I can trust you just because you say so. Miles nodded, understanding the weight of her words. I know. And I'm not asking you to forget. I just want to prove to you that I'm not the person you think I am. For the first time since they had met, Emily felt something stir inside her. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the possibility of something more. She didn't know what it was yet, but it was there. And it was enough for now. Okay, she said, her voice soft but steady. I'll give you a chance. The following week, Emily and Miles met several times, each encounter revealing more about their lives. As they continued to get to know one another, Emily began to notice small changes in herself. There was something about Miles' presence, his quiet but determined demeanor, that made her start to believe things might actually get better. She had never expected to find someone who understood her struggles so completely. And yet, here he was. Miles, the man with everything, trying to walk in her shoes and understand what it was like to live without. They met at a small, cozy cafe one Friday afternoon. Emily was early, waiting for him by the window, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. She was no stranger to uncertainty, but this felt different. She was starting to feel something for him, but she wasn't sure if it was the right thing. Her past had taught her to be cautious, to never trust too easily. And now, she found herself wondering if she could trust him. Miles walked in, looking as composed as ever. He was wearing a simple jacket, his usual elegant style tempered by the fact that they were just two people having coffee. He spotted her immediately and smiled, his eyes lighting up when they met hers. Hey, he said, his voice soft and warm as he sat down. Sorry I'm late. It's okay, Emily replied, giving him a small smile. I just got here a few minutes ago. They exchanged pleasantries before silence fell between them. For the first time, Emily wasn't sure what to say. She had so many questions, but they all felt too complicated, too personal. Miles was the one who broke the silence. I've been thinking, he started, his voice steady but thoughtful, about what you said last time. How I can't really understand what it's like to be you. Emily looked up at him, surprised. You don't have to worry about that, she said quickly, trying to brush off the discomfort that had suddenly settled in her chest. I don't expect you to. It's just, well, you can never truly know what it's like unless you've lived it. Miles nodded slowly, a thoughtful look on his face. I get that. And you're right. I can't really know. He paused, looking down at his coffee before looking back at her. But I want to try. I don't want to just be the guy who lives in his bubble. I want to do something more. Something real. Emily's eyes softened. She could hear the sincerity in his words. But was it enough? Could she believe him? What do you mean? She asked cautiously. Miles leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. I've been thinking a lot about what I want out of life. And I don't want it to be just about the money, the power, or the image. I want to make a difference. I want to do something that matters. He looked at her, his eyes earnest. And I think I can do that by starting with you. By really listening to you, learning from you, and maybe we can both make a difference together. Emily was taken aback by his words. She hadn't expected him to say something like that, especially after everything she'd known about the world he came from. She had always believed that people like him, wealthy, powerful, were too far removed from the struggles of everyday people to truly understand. But here he was, saying that he wanted to change. He wanted to make a difference. It was hard for Emily to wrap her head around. Was this real? Or was it just another fleeting moment of hope that would fade like so many others? She shook her head slightly, trying to clear her thoughts. "Miles, I don't know if you understand what you're asking," she said quietly. "It's not just about doing something meaningful. It's about living it every day. It's about sacrifice, struggle, and sometimes, it's about giving up everything you have." Miles didn't flinch at her words. "I get it," he said, his voice calm and steady. "But I'm willing to sacrifice if it means doing something that truly matters. And I think we could do that together." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She had never heard anyone say something like that to her before. It was as though, in that moment, Miles was offering her the world. Not just as a charity case, not as someone to be saved, but as a partner, someone to walk alongside him in this journey. She didn't know if she was ready for that. She didn't know if she could trust him enough to take that step. But there was something in his eyes, something that told her he wasn't just talking. He meant it. She took a deep breath. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. This is all so new. I've never had anyone offer to do something like this for me." Miles reached across the table, his hand hovering just above hers. "You don't have to say anything yet. Just know that I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." Emily looked at his hand, then back at his face. There was a sincerity there, a promise in his eyes that she couldn't ignore. It was enough to make her heart beat a little faster. "Okay," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Let's see where this goes." And with that, something shifted between them. The air felt lighter, the weight of her doubts momentarily lifted. They weren't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Miles continued to meet regularly. At first, their meetings were simple: coffee, casual conversations, and long walks through the city. But with each passing day, Emily found herself opening up more to him, and she couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in herself. Her once unwavering sense of skepticism was slowly replaced with a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was what she had been searching for all along. One evening, as they sat at the same small cafe where they'd shared their first deeper conversation, Emily felt a weight lift off her chest. It had been a long day, full of uncertainty, but for the first time in a while, she felt like she could breathe again. Miles, sitting across from her, was looking at her with that same focused gaze, the one that made her feel like he was truly listening. "You know," Miles began, his voice steady and calm, "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about last time. About making a difference." Emily looked up from her coffee cup, meeting his eyes. "Yeah," she replied, curious. "I think we've both realized that it's not enough just to talk about it. We need to act." He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I decided to use some of my resources to make a real impact, whether that's through the charity I've been working on or something else. I want to make sure it's something real, something that changes lives." Emily blinked, taken aback. She had expected him to follow through with some of his plans, but hearing him say it out loud made it all feel more concrete. "That sounds amazing, Miles," she said, her voice filled with a mix of admiration and skepticism. "But you know it's not going to be easy. You can't just throw money at problems and expect them to go away. There are deeper issues at play." Miles nodded. "I know. And I'm not trying to throw money at it. I'm trying to find a way to create lasting change. I want to help people who are struggling, like you, in ways that truly matter." His words stirred something in Emily, a realization that she hadn't fully allowed herself to feel. She had always been so focused on surviving, on making it through each day, that she had stopped believing in the possibility of real change. But here was Miles, a man who had the means to do whatever he wanted, and yet he was choosing to invest his time and energy into making a difference. She couldn't help but feel both inspired and conflicted. "You really mean that, don't you?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I do," Miles replied, his gaze unwavering. "And I want you to be a part of it." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined herself being part of something like this. A few weeks ago, she had been struggling to get by, unsure of what the future held. Now, she was sitting across from a man who was not only offering to help her, but also asking her to join him in creating something bigger. "You want me to help you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes," Miles said with a gentle smile. "I want your perspective. I want you to help me understand what real change looks like from someone who has lived it." Emily felt a mix of emotions, excitement, fear, hope, but above all, she felt a sense of responsibility. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, if she was ready to take on such a big challenge. But something inside her told her that this was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to make a difference, not just for herself, but for others. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this," she said hesitantly. "I've only just started getting back on my feet. I don't have all the answers." Miles reached across the table and took her hand in his. His touch was warm, grounding her in the moment. "That's exactly why I need you," he said softly. "You see the world differently than I do. You've lived it. You understand the struggles that people face on a daily basis, and that's what we need to create real change." Emily looked down at their hands, her heart racing. Could she really do this? Could she be part of something bigger than herself, something that could make a real impact on the world? She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could be a part of something meaningful. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steady. "I'll help you. But we're doing this the right way. We'll make sure that what we do is real, that it helps people in ways that matter." Miles squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I knew I could count on you." As they sat there, holding hands in the quiet cafe, Emily realized that this was just the beginning. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. Together, she and Miles were about to embark on a journey that would change everything, not just for them, but for everyone they aimed to help. The world had always seemed like a place of obstacles and challenges, but now it felt like a place of possibility. With Miles by her side, Emily finally felt like she could make a difference, one step at a time. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Emily and Miles dove into their new project with determination and excitement. They spent hours brainstorming ideas and researching ways to create a sustainable impact. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, they were both committed to making a difference. Emily had always been a hard worker, but this felt different. She wasn't just working for survival anymore, she was working for something bigger, something that could change lives. And Miles was right there with her, supporting her every step of the way. The more they worked together, the more Emily realized how much she had underestimated him. He wasn't just the rich businessman he appeared to be, he was genuinely invested in their mission. The first few weeks were filled with late-night meetings and phone calls with potential partners. They had to be strategic, making sure their efforts would lead to something meaningful and long-lasting. As they navigated the complexities of building a non-profit organization, Emily found herself growing not just as a professional, but as a person. She was learning how to balance the realities of the world with her desire to help others. But even with all the progress they were making, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something missing. One evening, as they were working late at the office, Emily spoke up. "Miles, do you ever wonder if we're doing enough? I mean, we've made progress, but I still feel like we're just scratching the surface." Miles looked up from his laptop, his expression thoughtful. "I think about that a lot," he admitted. "But the thing is, you can't change everything all at once. The best thing we can do is keep pushing forward, one step at a time. We're already making an impact, even if it's not as big as we want it to be." Emily nodded, but there was still a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She had seen so much pain, so much hardship in her life, and sometimes it felt like no matter how hard they worked, it wouldn't be enough. "I know," she said quietly. "But I still feel like we could be doing more. There are so many people out there who need help, and we're only reaching a fraction of them." Miles stood up from his desk and walked over to where Emily was sitting. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "Emily, you're doing something most people don't even try. You're giving people hope. And that's more than most people ever do." She looked up at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had spent so much time focusing on what they hadn't done, she had almost forgotten how far they had come. The impact they had made, the lives they had already touched, were proof that they were on the right path. "You're right," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. "We're doing good work. And we'll keep going, even when it gets tough." Miles smiled back, his eyes filled with pride. "Exactly. We'll keep going. Together." Over the next few weeks, their project began to take shape. They held community events, partnered with local organizations, and raised funds for those in need. The work was hard, but it was fulfilling in ways Emily had never imagined. As they continued to make progress, Emily began to realize just how much she had changed since meeting Miles. She had gone from being a woman struggling to make ends meet to someone who was making a real difference in her community. It wasn't always easy, there were setbacks, obstacles, and moments of doubt. But every time they faced a challenge, Emily felt stronger, more determined to push through. She wasn't alone anymore. Miles was with her every step of the way, and together, they were making their dream a reality. One evening, as they stood outside a community center after a successful fundraiser, Emily looked at Miles with a sense of accomplishment. "I never thought I'd be here," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. This feels like a dream." Miles smiled, his eyes reflecting the same pride she felt. "You made it happen, Emily. You've worked harder than anyone I know. And now, look at what we've built together." Emily felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at him. She had never imagined that one simple act of kindness, one unexpected meeting, could lead her to this moment. But here she was, standing beside a man who had become not only her partner in this mission but also her closest friend. They had started with nothing but hope, and now they were building something that would last. As they watched the last of the guests leave the event, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. She had finally found her purpose. And in doing so, she had found something even more precious, someone who believed in her, in their shared dream, and in the power of change. Together, they were unstoppable. Months had passed since Emily and Miles began their project, and things were moving faster than they had ever imagined. The community had embraced their efforts, and the small, humble beginnings of their non-profit were starting to blossom into something impactful. Emily had grown into her new role, one that she never expected to take on. She was no longer just trying to survive, she was thriving, helping others, and building a future she could be proud of. Miles, too, had changed in ways he hadn't expected. The more time he spent working alongside Emily, the more he realized how much he had been missing from his life. He had lived with all the comforts in the world but never truly understood what it meant to have purpose. Now, as he stood by Emily's side, watching the progress they were making, he knew he had found that purpose. However, with all the success and the good they were doing, trouble was never far behind. One afternoon, as Emily was meeting with a new group of volunteers, she received an unexpected call from a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated for a moment but decided to answer. "Hello," she asked, her voice curious. "Is this Emily Jacobs?" a stern voice asked on the other end. "Yes, it is," she replied, her curiosity piqued. "Who is this?" "This is Jennifer Hall, from the Nonprofit Oversight Committee. We've been reviewing your organization's financial records," the voice continued, "and we have some concerns." Emily's stomach dropped. She had always been careful with the organization's finances, ensuring everything was above board. "What kind of concerns?" she asked, her voice steady, though anxiety bubbled beneath the surface. We've noticed some discrepancies in your last financial report. Large donations have been unaccounted for, and we need to discuss this with you immediately. I suggest you come to our office as soon as possible. The call ended abruptly before Emily could respond. Her mind raced, and a sense of dread settled over her. Miles had been handling a lot of the financials, and they had both worked so hard to ensure everything was transparent. But now, doubts began to creep in. She knew she needed to talk to him, and quickly. When she found Miles later that day, she didn't waste any time. "Miles, we have a problem," she said, her voice tense. "I just got a call from Jennifer Hall at the Nonprofit Oversight Committee. They found discrepancies in our financials, and they're asking to meet with us." "What's going on?" Miles froze, his face turning pale. For a moment, he didn't say anything, but Emily could see the wheels turning in his mind. "Miles," she asked again, her voice soft but demanding an answer. He took a deep breath, his eyes avoiding hers. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. Emily's heart raced. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Miles hesitated before finally looking her in the eye. "When we started this project, I didn't just want to help others, I wanted to make sure I could do it in a way that showed people I wasn't just another rich guy. But in trying to keep things above board and make sure we were doing everything right, I got desperate. I took some shortcuts with our finances, just a few, to make things look better." Emily's mind went blank. "What?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "You took shortcuts?" Miles nodded, his guilt evident. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I wanted to prove that I was capable of doing this without relying on my family's money. But in trying to make it work, I ended up making mistakes." Emily felt a wave of anger and disappointment wash over her. "How could you? After everything we've worked for? How could you jeopardize everything?" "I'm sorry," Miles said, his voice heavy with regret. "I didn't want to disappoint you. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. But now it's all falling apart." Emily took a step back, trying to process the magnitude of what he had just confessed. Her instincts told her to walk away, to leave the situation and never look back. But something inside her wouldn't let her do that. She had invested too much into this project, too much into their partnership, to just give up. "We need to fix this," she said, her voice firm. "We have to come clean to the committee. We can't hide this any longer. They deserve to know the truth, and we have to show them we're committed to making it right." Miles nodded, a look of defeat in his eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes. I don't want to lose everything we've worked for." Emily took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "We're going to face this head on. We'll explain everything, and we'll make sure the finances are cleared up. It won't be easy, but we'll get through it." That evening, Emily and Miles met with Jennifer Hall and the Nonprofit Oversight Committee. It was one of the most intense meetings of their lives. They laid everything out on the table, confessing the mistakes that had been made and explaining their plan to correct the issues. It was an uphill battle, but they were determined to make it right. By the end of the meeting, Jennifer had agreed to give them a chance to fix the situation. It wasn't going to be easy, there would be audits, scrutiny, and a lot of work to do. But they had the opportunity to redeem themselves. "We'll make sure this never happens again," Emily promised, her voice resolute. "We've learned our lesson." As they left the meeting, the weight of what had happened still hung over them, but there was a sense of relief, too. They had faced the truth and were ready to make things right. And despite the rocky road ahead, Emily knew one thing for sure: she wouldn't give up on this project, on Miles, or on the dream they had built together. The following weeks were filled with hard work and long hours as Emily and Miles worked to clean up their organization's financial issues. The audits were rigorous, and the scrutiny from the Nonprofit Oversight Committee was intense. But they faced it all with determination. Every meeting, every document review, every call to fix the discrepancies brought them closer to redemption. Emily could feel the weight lifting slowly, though the pressure never fully eased. Miles, despite the guilt he carried, was working tirelessly alongside her, doing everything he could to make things right. They even brought in an external financial advisor to help with the process, ensuring complete transparency. It was a challenge, but Emily found strength in the process. With every correction they made, they were one step closer to restoring the trust they had lost. But as they neared the final stages of resolving the financial issues, a new challenge emerged. One afternoon, Emily received a call from a local journalist, a woman named Sarah Thompson. "Is this Emily Jacobs?" Sarah asked, her voice professional but firm. "Yes, it is," Emily replied, curiosity piqued. "Who is this?" "My name is Sarah Thompson, and I'm a reporter for the local news. I've been following the story of your nonprofit, and I have some questions about the recent financial discrepancies. I'd like to do an interview to get your side of the story." Emily's stomach churned. She had been dreading this moment. The media could make or break everything they had worked for, and the last thing they needed was negative attention. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," Emily said, her voice tense. "I understand the need for transparency, but right now, we're still working through the issues. It's a delicate situation, and I don't want to make it worse." Sarah's tone softened slightly. "I understand your concerns, Emily, but the public deserves to know the truth. It's not just about the financials, it's about the journey of your organization, the good you've done, and the lessons you've learned. This could be an opportunity to show that you're committed to doing things the right way." Emily felt a pang of uncertainty. She had never been comfortable in the spotlight, and now, she was being asked to open up about the mistakes they had made. It wasn't easy, but she knew that Sarah had a point. They couldn't hide from the truth. They had to face it head on. After a long pause, Emily finally spoke. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll do the interview. But I need to make it clear that we've been working hard to fix our mistakes. We're committed to doing things right, and I want to make sure that comes across." "Absolutely," Sarah replied. "I'll make sure the focus is on the positive steps you're taking. We can schedule for tomorrow afternoon. Does that work for you?" Emily agreed, her mind already racing with all the things she needed to prepare for. The next day, Emily met Sarah at the small cafe they had agreed on for the interview. Sarah was already sitting at a table when Emily arrived, a notebook in hand. She looked up as Emily approached, offering a friendly smile. "Thanks for meeting with me, Emily," she said, gesturing for Emily to sit down. "I know this isn't an easy conversation, but I appreciate your willingness to talk." Emily nodded, her nerves making her feel slightly out of place. "I'm just trying to do what's right," she said, sitting down. Sarah opened her notebook and looked at her with a focused expression. "Let's start with the basics. Can you tell me a little about your nonprofit and what you've been working on?" Emily took a deep breath and began to explain their mission, the work they had done, and the community they had served. As she spoke, she felt a sense of pride swell in her chest. Despite the setbacks, despite the mistakes, they had made a real difference. "We've done a lot of good," Emily continued, "but we've also made mistakes. We're not perfect. We've had to face the consequences of those mistakes, and we're doing everything we can to make it right." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "What do you think the biggest lesson has been for you personally throughout all of this?" Emily hesitated, thinking carefully before answering. "The biggest lesson has been learning that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as you own up to them and work to fix them. It's not about hiding from the truth or pretending everything is perfect. It's about being honest, taking responsibility, and making things right." Sarah scribbled some notes, then looked up at Emily with a knowing smile. "It sounds like you've learned a lot through this process. What would you say to people who still have doubts about your nonprofit's future?" Emily met her gaze, her voice firm but sincere. "I understand the doubts. But what I can promise is that we're committed to doing the right thing. We're not here for the spotlight. We're here to help people, to make a real difference. And we're not going to stop." The interview continued, and as Emily answered more questions, she began to feel a sense of relief. It wasn't easy, but it was cathartic to speak openly about the challenges they had faced. By the end of the conversation, Sarah thanked her and assured her that the story would reflect the progress they had made. As Emily left the cafe, she felt lighter. The media could be a powerful tool, but this time, she had used it to show the world who they truly were. With Miles by her side and a renewed sense of purpose, Emily knew that they would continue to face whatever came their way. They had made mistakes, but they were learning and growing, and that was what truly mattered. The aftermath of the interview brought unexpected results. The story Sarah wrote about Emily and the non-profit was well received. It didn't shy away from the difficulties they had faced, but it also highlighted the hard work they had put in to fix their mistakes. The media's response was surprisingly positive, with many people applauding their transparency and determination to improve. The public's perception of their organization shifted in their favor, and soon, more volunteers began showing up, eager to contribute. The donations, which had slowed down during the turmoil, began to increase again, fueling their mission and the projects they had been working on. It was the breakthrough they needed, the proof that they could turn their struggles into a stepping stone for greater success. However, even with the momentum they had gained, there was still the challenge of ensuring that their success was sustainable. Emily and Miles spent countless hours refining their plans, reaching out to more partners, and ensuring their operations were solid. They were building something that could stand the test of time, something that could truly change lives. But as the pressure mounted, Emily began to feel the weight of their responsibilities more than ever before. She had always known that leading a non-profit was no easy task, but now the reality of balancing everything was sinking in. There were so many moving parts, meetings, events, fundraising, that sometimes it felt overwhelming. Miles, too, was feeling the strain. The pressure of keeping the non-profit afloat while managing his own personal challenges was starting to take its toll. One evening, after a particularly long day, Emily sat down at her desk in the office, staring at the mountain of paperwork in front of her. She rubbed her temples, trying to ward off the headache that had started to build. Miles walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee, his usual calm demeanor now tinged with exhaustion. "I thought you could use this," he said, placing the cup down in front of her. Emily looked up, grateful for the gesture. "Thanks," she said, her voice tired. "I don't know how much longer I can keep up with all this." Miles sat down beside her, his expression softening. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm feeling the same way. But we're doing something good here, Emily. We can't lose sight of that." Emily nodded, taking a sip of the coffee. It was warm, comforting, but it didn't erase the exhaustion that weighed on her. "I know," she said. I feel like there's always something else to do. It's like the work is never ending, and no matter how much we accomplish, it's never enough." Miles studied her for a moment, then placed his hand on her shoulder. "It's okay to feel like that," he said. "We're in this together, and we've already come so far. Don't let the pressure make you forget that." Emily met his gaze, her eyes searching his. There was sincerity in his voice, and in that moment, she realized something. Miles wasn't just her business partner anymore. He had become her anchor. He was the one who kept her grounded when everything seemed to be spinning out of control. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. Miles smiled, his hand still resting on her shoulder. "And you don't have to. I'm here for the long haul, Emily. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The reassurance in his words soothed Emily's anxiety, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. They didn't have all the answers, and they certainly didn't have the perfect solution to every problem. But they had each other, and that was enough. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of events, meetings, and continued growth for their non-profit. With the public support they had gained from the media and their increased donations, they were able to expand their programs and help even more people in need. Emily, despite her earlier concerns, found herself thriving in the role she had taken on. She was more confident in her decisions, more decisive in her actions. She realized that the struggles they had faced only made her stronger, and she was proud of the work they were doing. One day, as they were finalizing plans for their next big community event, Miles pulled her aside. "Emily," he said, his tone serious but kind, "I've been thinking about something." "What is it?" she asked, looking up at him. "I want to do something big for you," Miles said. "You've worked so hard, and I think it's time you took a step back and let me take the lead for a while. I know how much this means to you, but you deserve to rest, too." Emily frowned slightly, surprised by his suggestion. "What do you mean?" "I'm not ready to step away from this." Miles smiled softly. "I don't mean step away completely," he said. "But I've noticed how much you've been carrying. And I want you to know that you don't have to do everything. You've done enough. It's my turn to step up and give you a little breathing room." Emily's heart swelled with gratitude. She had always been the one, pushing herself to the limit, trying to make everything work, but Miles was right. She didn't have to do it all. I don't know what to say," she said quietly. Miles chuckled, his hand gently squeezing hers. "Just say a thank you." Emily smiled, feeling the weight of the world lift off her shoulders just a little bit. She had never expected this kind of partnership, but now that she had it, she didn't want to let it go. With Miles by her side, she felt like anything was possible. The days after Miles' offer to take the lead were a strange mix of relief and unease for Emily. On one hand, she knew he was right. She had been working non-stop for months, carrying the weight of their non-profit on her shoulders. On the other hand, stepping back felt like admitting that she couldn't handle it all on her own, and that was hard for her to accept. She had always prided herself on being self-sufficient, on solving problems and getting things done without relying on anyone. But now, as she watched Miles take charge of their latest project, she found herself stepping back into a more supportive role, one that still allowed her to contribute, but not at the expense of her well-being. The first few days were awkward. She found herself hovering around Miles as he made decisions, offering suggestions here and there, but it wasn't until one late afternoon that she realized just how much she had needed this break. The non-profit was hosting a fundraiser that evening, and as the event drew near, Emily found herself in the background, helping with the smaller tasks, setting up tables, greeting guests, and overseeing the volunteers. She watched Miles work the room, engaging with donors and potential partners, his charisma and drive on full display. It was clear that he had a natural gift for leadership, and seeing him take control with such confidence made Emily feel a sense of pride that she hadn't expected. As the event progressed, Emily found herself having more meaningful conversations with the people who had supported their work, many of whom were genuinely interested in learning about the changes they had made. She realized that she didn't always need to be the one in the spotlight. Sometimes, stepping back allowed others to shine. It was a revelation that felt freeing. By the end of the night, the fundraiser had raised more money than they had hoped for, and Emily couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for how far they had come. Miles had proven not just to her, but to everyone in the room, that he was more than capable of leading their cause forward. And Emily had proven to herself that she didn't need to do it all alone. "You did great tonight," Miles said as they stood by the door, watching the last of the guests leave. "You made this happen too. Without you, none of this would be possible." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "It feels good to take a step back," she admitted. "And it feels even better knowing I don't have to do it all." "You're right, Miles. You've got this. I trust you." He grinned, the pride in his eyes reflecting her own. "We've got this," he corrected her gently. "Together." It was a simple phrase, but it meant the world to Emily. The sense of partnership they had built was stronger than any challenge they had faced, and it felt like they were finally in a place where they could truly rely on one another. As the days passed, Emily found herself embracing her new role. She was still deeply involved in the nonprofit's work, but she no longer felt the pressure to carry the entire load. She was able to focus on areas that inspired her most, like mentoring the new volunteers and overseeing the community outreach programs. She had more time to connect with the people they were helping, and that connection was what fueled her passion. At the same time, Miles continued to take the lead in running the organization. He was a natural at building relationships and forging partnerships with other organizations, and he managed the financial side of things with incredible skill. They complemented each other perfectly, and their collaboration was becoming the foundation of the nonprofit's growth. But just when things seemed to be falling into place, another challenge appeared on the horizon. One afternoon, as Emily and Miles were meeting with a potential donor, they received an urgent call from the nonprofit's legal team. "We have a problem," the lawyer said, his voice tense. "There's a lawsuit. A former employee is claiming that the organization hasn't upheld its commitments to workers' rights." Emily's heart sank. She had always been meticulous about maintaining a respectful and fair workplace, and hearing this accusation made her feel like everything they had worked for could be in jeopardy. "How serious is this?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with concern. "It's serious enough that we need to respond quickly," the lawyer replied. "We'll need to meet with the employee's lawyer, and we may have to settle this before it escalates any further." Emily hung up the phone and turned to Miles. "This is the last thing we need right now," she said, her frustration obvious. Miles didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, his brow furrowed, thinking. Finally, he spoke. "We'll deal with it," he said simply. "We'll fix it the same way we've dealt with everything else, head on. It won't be easy, but we've got the right team behind us." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. She knew he was right. They couldn't let this new challenge derail everything they had built. It was just another obstacle to overcome, and they had faced plenty of those before. They spent the next few weeks working closely with their legal team, making sure that every detail of the case was addressed. As they navigated the complex legal issues, Emily found herself relying more and more on Miles. His calm demeanor and unwavering confidence gave her the strength to keep going, even when the situation felt overwhelming. In the end, they were able to reach a settlement with the former employee, avoiding any damage to their reputation. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best they could do under the circumstances. As they closed that chapter, Emily couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of determination. Every time they overcame an obstacle, they grew stronger. The challenges they faced were only proof of their commitment to their cause. And as long as they had each other, Emily knew they could handle anything that came their way. As the nonprofit continued to grow, Emily and Miles found themselves busier than ever. They were no longer just a small organization struggling to get by, they were now making a real impact in the community, and their reputation was spreading. More and more people were reaching out to volunteer, donate, and partner with them on their mission. The momentum was undeniable, but so were the new challenges. One morning, as Emily sat at her desk, reviewing the progress of their upcoming community outreach programs, Miles entered the room with a somber look on his face. "What's wrong?" Emily asked, looking up from her notes. Miles hesitated for a moment before sitting down beside her. "I just got off the phone with the bank," he said quietly. "We've hit a bit of a financial snag." Emily's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "We've been doing so well with donations and fundraising." "I know," Miles said, running a hand through his hair. "But there's a gap between the money we've raised and the amount we need to continue expanding our services. We've been overextended lately, and it's starting to catch up with us." Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had been waiting for this moment, the reality that growth meant more expenses, more risks. "So, what do we do?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with concern. "We need to find a way to cover the gap," Miles said. "We can't just let everything we've worked for fall apart now. I was thinking of applying for a larger grant, but that would take time, and we might not get it in time. We may need to consider a loan." Emily felt a wave of unease. She had never been comfortable with the idea of borrowing money, especially not after all the financial challenges they had faced before. But she also knew that their mission was worth fighting for. "Let's look into the grant first," she said. "If we can't get it in time, we'll figure out the loan. But we need to make sure we have a solid plan in place before we take any major steps." "Agreed," Miles said, nodding. "We'll work on the grant application and reach out to some potential investors in the meantime." We won't go down without a fight. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and countless hours spent trying to secure the funding they needed. Emily and Miles worked tirelessly, staying up late to perfect their grant proposal, reaching out to their network, and exploring every possible avenue to keep the organization afloat. It was one of the most stressful periods of their journey, but it also reminded them of why they had started in the first place. The pressure was immense, but they were not going to give up. Then, one Friday afternoon, as Emily was walking back to the office after a meeting, her phone buzzed with a new email notification. She quickly pulled it up, her heart racing as she saw the subject line, Grant Application Status. She opened it and read the words that made her heart skip a beat, Congratulations. Your application has been approved. We are pleased to offer your organization a grant to support your ongoing programs. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had done it. The grant had come through. It wasn't the entire amount they needed, but it was enough to bridge the gap and keep their programs running smoothly for the next few months. She immediately called Miles to share the good news. Miles, you won't believe it, she said, her voice filled with excitement. We got the grant. We're approved. Miles' voice on the other end of the line was filled with disbelief. Are you serious? He asked, the joy in his tone unmistakable. This is incredible. Emily laughed, feeling the weight of the past few weeks finally lifting off her shoulders. I know. It's not everything we need, but it's a huge step in the right direction. We can keep moving forward. This is huge, Miles said, his voice filled with gratitude. We're not done yet, but this is the break we've been waiting for. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of pride in their accomplishment. It wasn't easy, and there would still be hurdles to overcome, but they had made it through another challenge. As the weeks passed, they continued to build on their momentum. The grant provided them with the stability they needed, and they were able to focus on expanding their services and connecting with even more people in the community. The response from their supporters was overwhelming. They were receiving more donations, more volunteers, and more media attention, all of which helped propel their mission forward. But even with all the success, Emily knew they couldn't stop. There was always more work to be done, more people to help, and more lives to touch. And she was ready for it. We've come so far, Emily said one evening as she sat down with Miles, reflecting on their journey. But we still have so much more to do. I know, Miles said, his eyes filled with determination. And we're going to keep going. Together. Emily nodded, feeling the same unwavering resolve. Their journey was far from over, but they had learned something valuable along the way. They were stronger together than they ever could have been apart. And with that knowledge, they were ready to face whatever the future held. The weeks following the approval of the grant were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Emily and Miles had learned to balance their responsibilities more effectively. With the grant secured, they had the breathing room they needed to expand their non-profit's reach and further solidify their efforts. Their programs were growing, and the community was responding with enthusiasm. More volunteers signed up, and the demand for their services increased. For the first time in months, Emily felt like they were truly making a difference. However, with success came more challenges. The strain of managing a growing organization weighed heavily on both of them, and while they had learned to rely on each other, the growing demands tested their limits. One Friday evening, as they were finalizing plans for a large community outreach event, Miles pulled Emily aside in the office. He looked serious, his expression more focused than usual. Emily, he began, I've been thinking about something. She looked at him, sensing the shift in his mood. What is it? She asked, her tone curious. Miles hesitated for a moment, clearly gathering his thoughts. I think it might be time for us to take the next big step, he said slowly. We need to scale up. We're doing great, but we can't keep growing at this rate without more infrastructure. We need a permanent space, more staff, and a larger network to handle what's coming next. Emily furrowed her brow, her mind racing. The idea of expanding so rapidly was daunting. They had just gotten through the financial hurdle, and now Miles was suggesting they grow even further. "Do you think we're ready for that?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "We've been through a lot already, and the pressure." Miles nodded, his expression understanding. "I know, but if we want to keep making an impact, we can't stay small forever. We've shown that we can handle what's been thrown at us. Now it's time to think bigger. We've been playing catch-up, but with this momentum, we need to take control of our future." Emily stood there, in silence for a moment, processing his words. She knew he was right. They couldn't keep functioning at the current level if they wanted to keep up with the demand and make the kind of impact they both envisioned. But the thought of taking on so much more responsibility was overwhelming. "I'm just worried, Miles," she said quietly. "What if we stretch ourselves too thin? What if we can't keep up with everything?" Miles walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We've already proved we can handle a lot. And we'll take it one step at a time. But we can't stop now. We owe it to ourselves and the people we've been helping to keep pushing forward." Emily looked up at him, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. She had always been cautious, always thinking 10 steps ahead to avoid making mistakes. But she also knew that if they didn't take this chance, they might never reach the potential they had worked so hard to achieve. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "Let's do it. Let's scale up." Miles smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "We're in this together, Emily. Whatever happens, we'll handle it. One step at a time." The decision was made. Over the next few months, Emily and Miles began the process of scaling up their non-profit. They started by securing a permanent office space, a place that would allow them to bring their team together and offer more services to the community. They also began recruiting more staff to help manage the increased workload. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of setbacks along the way. The growing pains were evident, and at times, Emily felt overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work that was required to make it all happen. But through it all, she reminded herself why they were doing this. They were helping people. They were making a difference. And that made every challenge worth facing. As they continued to build and grow, Emily found herself feeling more confident in her role. She had always been the one to take the reins, but now she was learning to trust others and delegate responsibilities. Miles, too, was learning to trust the team they had built, and together, they formed a partnership that was stronger than ever. But as their organization expanded, so did the scrutiny. Emily began to notice a shift in the way some of their partners and donors viewed them. While most people were supportive, there were a few who started questioning their methods, their expansion, and whether they were truly as transparent as they claimed to be. It wasn't a full-on attack, but the doubts were starting to creep in. One afternoon, Emily received a call from one of their larger donors, a man named Thomas, who had been a strong supporter of their work from the beginning. "Emily, we need to talk," Thomas said, his tone serious. "I've been hearing some things about your non-profit, about your expansion plans. I'm concerned that you're taking on too much too fast. Can you explain why this is happening?" Emily's heart sank. She had always trusted Thomas, and the last thing she wanted was to disappoint him. "I understand your concerns, Thomas," she said, keeping her voice calm. "But we've been carefully planning our growth. We've been transparent about every decision we've made, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that our programs remain effective." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I hope you're right," Thomas said, though there was still a note of skepticism in his voice. "But we'll be watching closely. I think you need to be cautious moving forward." The conversation ended on a tense note, and Emily was left to wonder if they had overstepped their bounds. She couldn't help but feel the weight of his words. Were they moving too fast? Had they bitten off more than they could chew? Miles could sense her worry when she told him about the call later that evening. "It's okay, Emily," he reassured her. "People are always going to question us. But that's because they care. It's a sign that we're doing something right. We just need to keep proving that we're worth the trust they've placed in us." Emily nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a tightrope. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they couldn't stop now. They had come too far to back down. The future of their non-profit was at stake, and Emily and Miles were determined to see it through, no matter the challenges ahead. The months following Thomas's call were filled with a mixture of growth and increasing pressure. Emily and Miles had successfully secured their new office space and were in the process of expanding their programs, but the doubts from a few of their larger donors and partners still weighed on Emily's mind. The skepticism from Thomas, in particular, had left her uneasy. While most of their supporters had rallied behind them, the concerns about their rapid growth were becoming harder to ignore. Emily had always prided herself on transparency, and the thought that they might not be seen as trustworthy was something she couldn't easily shake. She had always done everything by the book, and now, despite all their hard work and success, it felt like they were being questioned at every turn. Miles, on the other hand, remained as steady as ever, his belief in their mission unwavering. He continued to reassure her, saying that the scrutiny was just a part of their growth, and that it would pass as long as they stayed true to their vision. But Emily couldn't help but wonder if they were pushing too hard, moving too quickly. One evening, as the non-profit prepared for its largest community event yet, Emily found herself walking through the halls of their new office, her thoughts swirling. She could hear the sound of laughter and chatter coming from the main room as volunteers and staff prepared for the big night. But even with the excitement surrounding her, a part of her remained anxious. Miles walked in, sensing her unease immediately. "You okay?" he asked, his tone gentle. Emily sighed, glancing at him with a small, uncertain smile. "I don't know, Miles. I keep thinking about what Thomas said. I keep thinking about whether we're really ready for all this." Miles stepped closer, his eyes soft but firm. "I get it. You're worried. But we've been working for this. We've worked too hard to let anyone's doubts shake us now. We're ready. We've always been ready." His words were reassuring, but Emily still couldn't fully shake the doubts. She had always been someone who overthought things, who analyzed every angle before making a decision. She knew she couldn't let her fears hold them back, but it was hard not to feel the weight of everything they had on their shoulders. "I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of why we started," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We wanted to help people. We wanted to make a difference. I don't want us to get lost in all the growth and the money." Miles smiled softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We won't. We're still here for the right reasons. And we'll always keep that at the heart of everything we do. The rest, everything else, is just details." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. She knew he was right. They couldn't let the noise around them distract from their purpose. And if they stayed true to their mission, everything else would fall into place. That evening, the community event was a huge success. The turnout was beyond anything they had hoped for, and the funds raised surpassed their expectations. The support from the community, both old and new, was overwhelming. As Emily watched people gather in the main hall, talking, laughing, and coming together for the cause, she felt a deep sense of pride. This was why they had started. This was what they had worked for. The evening ended with a speech from Emily and Miles, where they spoke about their journey, their growth, and their commitment to continue making a difference. As Emily spoke, she could feel the weight of the doubts and fears she had been carrying slowly lifting. The faces in the crowd, the people who believed in their mission, reminded her of why they couldn't stop now. After the event, as they cleaned up and said their goodbyes, Miles pulled Emily aside. "I think this is it," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "We've reached the tipping point. This is where it all starts to come together." Emily smiled, feeling a rush of pride and relief. "I think you're right," she said, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We're ready. We've made it this far. Now we just have to keep going." The next few weeks were filled with more growth and more challenges. Emily and Miles continued to expand their programs, but they also took time to ensure that the organization remained true to its roots. They met with new donors, partnered with other organizations, and continued to strengthen the bonds they had built within the community. But it wasn't always easy. There were moments when Emily felt overwhelmed, when the pressure of everything they were building threatened to consume her. There were still skeptics, still people who doubted their ability to sustain the momentum. But every time she started to lose faith, she remembered the faces in the crowd that night, those who believed in them and their mission. They were the reason they couldn't stop. And they would keep going, no matter what. One afternoon, as Emily sat in her office, going over plans for the next big event, she received another call from Thomas. Her heart raced for a moment, unsure of what to expect. "Emily, I wanted to follow up after the event," Thomas said, his tone much more neutral than the last time they spoke. "I've been hearing a lot of positive feedback, and I think it's clear that you and Miles have something really special going on here." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you, Thomas. That means a lot to us." "I've been thinking," Thomas continued, "and I'm willing to offer additional support moving forward. I think we can take this to the next level together." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Really?" she asked, her voice filled with gratitude. "That would be incredible." "You've earned it," Thomas said, his voice warm. "Let's talk more about how we can expand even further." As she hung up the phone, Emily felt a sense of accomplishment settle in her chest. The uncertainty that had plagued her for so long was beginning to fade. They had faced their doubts head-on, and now, they were being rewarded for their hard work and dedication. With Miles by her side and a renewed sense of purpose, Emily knew that whatever came next, they were ready. They had already proven that they could overcome anything, and together, they would continue to change lives. As the months continued to pass, Emily and Miles found themselves not only managing a growing organization but also becoming leaders in their community. Their non-profit had gained significant traction, and the additional support from Thomas had allowed them to further expand their programs. The weight of responsibility, however, had never felt heavier. Despite all the successes they were seeing, Emily knew that the real work was just beginning. She had always been someone who could deal with challenges head-on, but now the challenges felt different. The pressure to succeed, to deliver results, was becoming increasingly overwhelming. Even Miles, the usually steady and unshakable force in their partnership, seemed worn thin. The constant push for more donations, more partnerships, more growth, was starting to take its toll. Emily watched him carefully one evening after another long day of meetings and planning. He was staring at his laptop, but she could tell his mind was elsewhere. "Miles," she said softly, walking over to his desk. "You okay?" He looked up, his tired eyes meeting hers. "I'm fine," he said, but his tone was off. Emily could sense that something was bothering him. "No, you're not," she said gently. "You've been running on fumes for weeks now. Maybe we need to take a step back." Miles sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I can't afford to take a step back, Emily. We can't afford it. Everything we've worked for could slip away if we stop pushing forward." Emily placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice calm but firm. "That's not true. We've built something incredible. We don't need to keep rushing to prove it's worth something. We need to take care of ourselves too. If we burn out, we won't be able to help anyone." Miles was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right," he admitted, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "I've been so focused on making sure we don't fail that I haven't stopped to think about what we need. What I need." Emily sat down beside him, her presence a quiet reminder that they were in this together. "We're a team, Miles," she said softly. "We've come this far because we've leaned on each other. We need to keep doing that." Miles turned to face her, his expression filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said quietly. "I couldn't have gotten this far without you." Emily smiled, feeling the weight of their shared journey. "We've both been through a lot. And we're still standing. That says something." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the hum of the office around them fading into the background. It was clear that both of them had been running on empty for far too long. But that night, they made a promise to each other, not just to keep going, but to take care of their mental and physical health along the way. They couldn't change the world if they were too worn out to do so. Over the next few weeks, Emily and Miles made small but significant changes. They began delegating tasks more effectively, trusting their team to take on more responsibility. They also set aside time for themselves, taking breaks when they needed them, and even scheduled time to simply relax and reconnect with the world outside of work. The results were immediate. They felt re-energized, their minds clearer and more focused. They were able to approach their work with a renewed sense of purpose and energy. And most importantly, they found themselves enjoying the journey once again. As the nonprofit continued to grow, Emily and Miles found themselves facing new and unexpected challenges. One afternoon, a potential corporate sponsor came forward with an offer to fund one of their larger initiatives. On the surface, it seemed like a perfect opportunity, an influx of money, a chance to expand their reach, and a partnership with a well-known company. But as they read through the details, Emily and Miles both began to feel uneasy. The terms of the agreement were far from ideal. The sponsor wanted a significant amount of control over the way their programs were run, and the demands for visibility and branding were overwhelming. "This could really take us to the next level," Miles said, his tone skeptical but intrigued. "But it could also take away everything we've worked for. If we accept this, we might lose the autonomy that's made our nonprofit so special." Emily looked at him, her brow furrowed. "I don't like how much control they want. We've always been transparent with our supporters. We can't let anyone dictate how we do things." Miles nodded slowly. "I agree. I'm just worried we might be turning down a major opportunity. We could do so much good with the money they're offering." Emily took a deep breath, thinking it through carefully. She had always been driven by their mission, but she knew they couldn't compromise their values just to get ahead. "We've always said we would prioritize the people we're helping above everything else. If this deal doesn't align with that, it's not the right choice. We'll find another way." Miles looked at her, a mixture of admiration and relief in his eyes. "You're right. We've gotten this far by sticking to what matters. We can't start compromising now." After much discussion, they ultimately decided to decline the sponsorship offer. It wasn't easy, there was so much potential in the partnership, and it had been hard to turn it down. But in the end, they knew they had made the right decision. They couldn't afford to let external pressure change who they were. They had built their nonprofit on trust, transparency, and a commitment to their cause, and they weren't about to let that slip away for the sake of quick success. As they moved forward, Emily and Miles knew that challenges would always be part of the equation. But they were no longer afraid of them. They had learned to trust their instincts, to stand by their values, and to take care of themselves along the way. And most importantly, they had learned that no matter how big their organization grew, they would always have each other to rely on. Together, they were unstoppable. As the nonprofit continued to flourish, Emily and Miles found themselves at the forefront of a rapidly changing landscape. Their work had gained national attention, and they were now faced with both incredible opportunities and difficult decisions. The initial struggles that had defined their journey seemed like distant memories, but the road ahead was far from easy. Emily, who had always been the one to take charge, was finding it more challenging than ever to maintain balance. As the organization expanded, the complexity of their work grew. They had new projects, more staff, and an increasing number of partners to manage. The financial demands had also intensified. Despite the grant they had secured and the additional corporate partnerships, there were still many days when Emily felt like they were barely keeping up. Miles, on the other hand, was managing the external relationships, working with donors, attending meetings with investors, and navigating the complex web of corporate partnerships. He was more than capable, but the pressure of handling the organization's growing reputation was beginning to weigh on him too. Late one evening, as Emily sat in the office, reviewing some financial projections, Miles walked in, his face lined with fatigue. "We need to talk," he said, his tone serious. Emily looked up, her eyes meeting his. "What's going on?" she asked, sensing the tension in his voice. Miles closed the door behind him, then walked over to her desk. "I've been thinking a lot about where we're headed," he began. We've done great things, but we're starting to face some bigger challenges. We need to think about how we're going to sustain this growth. The pressure is building, and I'm not sure we're prepared for what's coming next. Emily listened carefully, her brow furrowing as she processed his words. She knew Miles well enough to understand that this wasn't just about logistics, it was about their core values. What do you mean? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. We've been growing. We've been expanding. Isn't that what we wanted? It is, Miles said, his voice softer now. But we need to make sure we're not losing ourselves in the process. I'm seeing the same thing happen to us that happens to every successful organization. We're chasing the next big thing, but we're not taking the time to step back and evaluate if it's the right thing for us, for the people we're trying to help. Emily looked down at the papers in front of her, her mind racing. She had always been focused on results, on getting things done, achieving their goals. But now, she realized, they were both right. They had been so focused on growing the nonprofit that they had lost sight of what made them different in the first place. They had started with a mission to help, to be part of the community. But as the organization grew, they had become increasingly removed from that core purpose. What should we do? Emily asked, her voice quiet. Miles paused for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. We need to refocus, he said firmly. We need to remind ourselves why we're doing this. It's not just about the numbers or the growth, it's about the people we're serving. And if we're not doing right by them, then all of this, everything we've worked for, isn't worth it. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. She knew that he was right. The work they had done had been meaningful, but they had gotten lost in the chase for success. I think we need to slow down, she said after a moment. Take a step back and reassess. What's our core mission? Are we still doing the work we set out to do? Or are we just trying to build something bigger? Miles nodded in agreement. Exactly. We need to simplify. We need to prioritize the programs that matter the most and focus on making a real, lasting impact, rather than spreading ourselves too thin with new projects and partnerships that may not align with our original vision. Emily smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. I'm glad you said that, she said. I've been feeling the same way. I think we both got caught up in the excitement of our success, but we've always said we wanted to do things right. Not just for the sake of growth, but for the sake of the people we serve. Right, Miles agreed. And the people we serve are the ones who need to feel our commitment, not just the programs we launch or the money we raise. They sat in silence for a few moments, both lost in their thoughts. The decision to slow down, to reassess, was a big one. But it felt like the right choice. They had been so focused on success that they had overlooked the very thing that had made their work meaningful in the first place, the connection to the people they were helping. The next few weeks were filled with thoughtful discussions and difficult decisions. Emily and Miles took a step back from some of their larger projects and focused on strengthening the foundation of their nonprofit. They streamlined their programs, ensuring that each initiative aligned with their original mission. They spent more time engaging with the community, getting feedback from those they served, and making sure that their work truly reflected the needs of the people. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when they questioned if they were doing the right thing by slowing down when the world around them was pushing them to move faster. But as they reconnected with their core mission, they found a renewed sense of purpose. The decisions they were making felt right, and the impact of their work began to feel even more meaningful. By the end of the year, their nonprofit was stronger than ever, not just in terms of growth, but in its ability to truly make a difference. They had learned an important lesson. It wasn't about how fast they grew or how many people they reached. It was about staying true to the values that had brought them together in the first place. Together, Emily and Miles knew that they were ready for whatever challenges came next. But this time, they would face them with a clearer sense of purpose and a renewed commitment to the people they served. As Emily and Miles continued to fine-tune their nonprofit's mission, the impact of their decision to slow down began to unfold in unexpected ways. The changes they had made, focusing more on their core mission and simplifying their programs, created a stronger, more engaged community around them. With the pressure to constantly grow lifted, they found themselves reconnected with the heart of their work, helping those in need. People began to notice the difference in the way the nonprofit operated. Volunteers were more engaged, donors felt more confident in supporting their cause, and the people they served felt the genuine care that went into every decision. One day, Emily received an email that would change the course of their journey. The subject line read, "Request for Partnership, Community Leadership Initiative." She opened the email with curiosity, and as she read, her excitement grew. It was from a large national organization that had been following their progress for some time. They were impressed by how Emily and Miles had rebuilt their nonprofit, focusing on real impact and sustainable growth. The email proposed a partnership, one that would offer significant resources, exposure, and opportunities for collaboration on a nationwide scale. Emily felt a rush of excitement mixed with caution. This could be the breakthrough they had been waiting for, but it also came with the possibility of new challenges. It was a partnership that required careful consideration. She immediately called Miles, her heart racing with both excitement and concern. "Miles, you won't believe this," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We've been approached by a national organization. They want to partner with us. This could be huge." Miles' voice was filled with interest, but he was also cautious. "That's amazing. But we need to be careful. You know, we've been down this road before, and it's easy to get swept up in something that seems too good to be true. Let's take our time and review everything carefully." Emily agreed. They had learned the hard way to never rush into a decision, no matter how enticing it seemed. Over the next few weeks, Emily and Miles worked closely with the organization's representatives to fully understand the terms of the partnership. They reviewed the proposal, weighing the pros and cons, and considered how it aligned with their nonprofit's core mission. As the weeks passed, their excitement grew, but so did their skepticism. The partnership offered incredible benefits, but it also came with strings attached. The organization wanted certain levels of control over the direction of the programs, which made Emily and Miles uneasy. They didn't want to lose the autonomy that had made their nonprofit so successful in the first place. They spent long hours discussing the potential risks, wondering if they were willing to sacrifice some of their independence for the chance to reach even more people. "I know it's tempting," Emily said one evening as they sat together, their laptops open in front of them. "But what are we really giving up? Our mission? Our voice?" Miles looked at her, his expression serious. "It's not an easy decision. But at the end of the day, we can't lose sight of what made us who we are. We've worked too hard to get here." Emily nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. She had always believed in their ability to make a difference, but this partnership would mean answering to someone else. And that was something she wasn't sure they were ready for. After much deliberation, Emily and Miles made the difficult decision to decline the partnership offer. They realized that while the resources and exposure were appealing, they couldn't afford to compromise their values. They had built their nonprofit with care, and they weren't about to risk losing that integrity. It was a hard decision, but ultimately, they knew it was the right one. The decision wasn't without its consequences. The national organization was disappointed but understood their reasoning. In the end, they parted ways amicably, and Emily and Miles were able to continue focusing on what they loved most, serving their community without outside interference. Their decision to stay true to their mission paid off in unexpected ways. As they continued to focus on their core values, they began to attract more local partnerships that were aligned with their mission. Donors, volunteers, and organizations saw that Emily and Miles were committed to making a difference without compromising their vision. With their newfound clarity, they launched new initiatives that reached more people than ever before. They expanded their programs, hired more staff, and worked even more closely with the community they served. It wasn't always easy, and the pressure to succeed never fully went away. But with each step, they felt more confident in their ability to manage the growth they had dreamed of, on their own terms. The feedback from the community was overwhelmingly positive. They were no longer just an organization, they were a trusted partner, a resource for those in need. Their work had a deep, lasting impact, and they knew they were doing things the right way. As the non-profit continued to grow, so did Emily and Miles. They were no longer just two people trying to make a difference, they were leaders, mentors, and advocates for the people they served. They had learned that success wasn't just about growth or recognition. It was about staying true to their mission and never losing sight of the people who mattered most. With their values intact, they were ready to face whatever came next, knowing that together they could accomplish anything. As Emily and Miles continued their journey, their non-profit was at a crossroads. They had declined the national partnership and focused on rebuilding and strengthening their local connections. They were more in control of their direction than ever before, but with that autonomy came even greater challenges. The weight of their responsibilities pressed heavily on both of them, but they had built a team they trusted and a community that believed in their mission. They had learned the importance of focusing on what truly mattered, but the future was still uncertain. Despite the success of their programs and the positive feedback from their community, Emily knew they were still vulnerable. The non-profit sector was volatile, and the external pressures to grow, attract donors, and expand services were relentless. As the holiday season approached, the non-profit's largest fundraising event was looming on the horizon. This event had always been a major source of funding, and with the increased demand for their programs, the stakes were higher than ever. Emily and Miles worked together tirelessly, preparing for the event. They knew they had to make it a success to ensure their programs could continue. The pressure was immense, but they were determined to see it through. The night of the event, the venue was filled with excitement and anticipation. Local supporters, donors, and volunteers gathered, and the atmosphere was electric. Miles and Emily moved through the crowd, greeting people, thanking them for their support, and sharing their vision for the future of the non-profit. As the evening went on, it became clear that the event was going better than they had hoped. Donations were pouring in, and there was a palpable sense of excitement about the work they were doing. But as Emily looked around the room, a familiar feeling crept over her. Despite the success of the evening, she felt a deep sense of exhaustion. The months of hard work, the constant stress of managing everything, were starting to take their toll. She had been pushing herself so hard that she had neglected her own well-being. Miles, too, seemed drained, though he tried to mask it with his usual enthusiasm. As the night wore on, Emily couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. She had always been focused on the work, on getting things done, but now she realized that they needed more than just a successful event. They needed balance. They needed to take care of themselves and each other. Miles, she said quietly, as the event began to wind down, we need to talk. Miles turned to her, his face filled with concern. What's wrong? He asked. Emily hesitated for a moment, then spoke the truth. I'm exhausted. We've been going non-stop for so long, and I don't think we can keep doing this. I can't keep doing this. Miles took a deep breath, his expression softening. I know. I've been feeling it too, he admitted. But we can't afford to stop now. We're so close, Emily. We've worked so hard to get here. Emily nodded, but the weight of their journey was starting to overwhelm her. I know, she said softly, but we've forgotten why we started this. It wasn't just about growth or success. It was about making a real difference, about helping people. We can't do that if we're running on empty. Miles took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. You're right. We've been so focused on the future, on what's next, that we've lost sight of what's right in front of us. We've been so busy building something that we haven't taken the time to enjoy what we've already accomplished. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. So what do we do now? She asked. Miles squeezed her hand and smiled back. We take a break. We slow down. We take care of ourselves and each other. We'll keep working, of course, but we need to remember to enjoy the journey, not just the destination. Emily felt a wave of gratitude for Miles. He had always been the one to keep her grounded, and now, he was reminding her to take care of herself. They had come so far, and there was still so much to do, but they couldn't forget the importance of self-care. They couldn't continue their work if they were burned out. As the event ended, Emily and Miles made a promise to each other. They would continue to grow, but they would do so at a pace that was sustainable. They would find balance in their lives, so they could continue to make a difference without sacrificing their own well-being. The next day, as they looked over the success of the event and the funds raised, they knew they had made the right decision. It wasn't just about the money or the growth, it was about maintaining their integrity, their health, and their passion for their mission. They had learned a valuable lesson: success was important, but so was taking care of themselves and each other. As they moved forward, Emily and Miles felt more connected than ever to their cause and to each other. They knew there would be more challenges ahead, but with the right balance, they could face anything that came their way. Together, they were ready to continue their journey, not just as leaders of a non-profit, but as partners who knew how to take care of themselves and the people they served. As the days passed after their decision to slow down and refocus on their mission, Emily and Miles felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their non-profit had weathered some of the toughest challenges they had faced, and though the path forward was still uncertain, they knew they had made the right decision to prioritize their values over unchecked growth. They spent the next several weeks fine-tuning their strategy and working more closely with the community they had built. They also made a point of getting more involved with the staff and volunteers, strengthening relationships that would help them continue their mission with more efficiency and heart. One morning, as they were reviewing the progress of their latest community initiative, Emily received an unexpected phone call. It was from an old friend, Grace, who had moved away years ago to pursue her career in another city. "Emily. It's Grace. How are you?" Grace's voice was bright, and Emily couldn't help but smile as she heard her friend's familiar tone. "Grace. I haven't heard from you in ages." "I'm doing well, just keeping busy with the non-profit. What about you?" "Same here, just finished a big project at work and thought I'd reach out. Actually, I've been following your non-profit's progress, and I'm so impressed. I love what you and Miles have built." Grace's words were a welcome surprise. Emily hadn't realized how closely Grace had been following their work, and hearing this kind of support from an old friend was a reminder of how far they had come. "Thank you, Grace. It means a lot to hear that," Emily replied, feeling grateful for the encouragement. "Actually, I've been thinking," Grace said, her tone becoming more serious. "There's a project I'm working on here in the city, and I think it might be a great fit for your non-profit. I'd love to talk more about it with you and see if we could collaborate." Emily's curiosity piqued. "That sounds intriguing. What kind of project are you working on?" Grace explained that her organization, a corporate consulting firm, had been working with local governments to design and implement sustainable community development programs. They were looking to partner with non-profit organizations that were actively working on the ground to bring real change. "I believe your non-profit's mission aligns perfectly with what we're trying to do," Grace continued. "We want to provide the resources, knowledge, and expertise that can help take your programs to the next level. I'd love for us to explore a partnership, see how we can combine our efforts." Emily's mind raced with possibilities. This kind of partnership could be just what they needed to expand their reach even further without compromising their values. It was exactly the kind of collaboration they had been looking for, one that was rooted in mutual respect and shared goals. "This sounds like an amazing opportunity," Emily said, her excitement growing. "Let's set up a time to talk more about it. I'd love to explore how we can work together." Over the next week, Emily and Miles met with Grace and her team, diving into the details of the potential partnership. They were impressed by the thoroughness of Grace's approach and the expertise her firm offered. The partnership would provide them with access to resources that would significantly enhance their ability to expand their programs in a sustainable and impactful way. But as they reviewed the details, a part of Emily still hesitated. They had been through so many difficult decisions, and this felt like another major step forward, one that would require careful consideration. "What do you think, Miles?" Emily asked one evening after their meeting with Grace. Miles leaned back in his chair, thoughtfully considering the proposal. "It's a big opportunity," he said slowly. "But it's also a big commitment. We've been so careful about staying true to our mission, and while this partnership could really help us grow, we can't lose sight of who we are. We need to be sure that we're not getting involved in something that compromises our values. Emily nodded, knowing exactly what he meant. We've already been down the road of big promises and corporate interests. This partnership feels different, but we have to make sure that we're still in control of our work. I don't want us to get swept up in the excitement and lose our way. Miles smiled, his eyes filled with trust. We won't. We're in this together, and we know what's important. We'll make sure we keep our core mission at the center of everything. After careful deliberation, Emily and Miles decided to move forward with the partnership. They worked closely with Grace and her team to establish clear guidelines for how they would collaborate, ensuring that their non-profit's mission remained the driving force behind their efforts. The partnership was built on a foundation of shared values, and it was a decision that would allow them to expand their reach while staying true to their commitment to help those in need. As the months passed, the collaboration proved to be a success. With the added support and expertise from Grace's organization, their programs grew in scope and impact. They were able to launch new initiatives that reached more people, provided more resources, and created lasting change in the communities they served. Emily and Miles watched as their non-profit evolved into something more than they had ever imagined. They had built a strong, sustainable foundation, and now they were working alongside experts who shared their vision for a better future. As they reflected on their journey, Emily and Miles realized just how far they had come. They had faced challenges, doubts, and setbacks, but through it all, they had remained committed to their mission. They had learned to trust each other, to trust their instincts, and to never compromise their values. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that the journey was far from over. Together, they were ready to continue making a difference, one step at a time. As the partnership with Grace's firm continued to strengthen, Emily and Miles found themselves navigating a new phase in the nonprofit's growth. The collaboration was proving to be more beneficial than they had initially hoped. The added resources, expertise, and strategic guidance were giving their initiatives a boost, and they were able to reach more people than ever before. Still, with all the success, there were moments when the weight of their expanded responsibilities began to feel overwhelming. They were juggling more projects, overseeing a growing team, and managing relationships with an increasing number of stakeholders. While the support from Grace's team was invaluable, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were at the tipping point, where their capacity to manage everything was starting to stretch thin. One afternoon, as they sat in their office reviewing quarterly reports and planning their next steps, Emily turned to Miles with a furrowed brow. "Miles, I've been thinking," she began, her voice heavy with concern. "We've been doing so much, and while everything seems to be going well, I can't help but feel like we're spreading ourselves too thin. Are we losing focus again?" Miles looked up from his laptop, meeting her gaze. He could sense the unease in her voice. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone calm but attentive. Emily leaned back in her chair, letting out a long breath. "We've been getting so much support lately, but we're managing so many things, new programs, new partnerships, more donors, more volunteers. It's all becoming a lot, and I'm not sure we're managing it as well as we could be. I'm worried that we're losing sight of what we started this for." Miles took a moment to think before responding. "I get it," he said thoughtfully. "It's a lot. But remember, we're not alone in this anymore. We have Grace's team, we've got a solid foundation, and we have a strong group of supporters. We've always said we'd make an impact, and that takes work. It's just that now, it's on a bigger scale." Emily nodded but still felt a gnawing concern in her chest. "I know, but the bigger scale brings more complexity. I'm just worried that we're going to lose the personal touch, the intimacy of our mission. We've always been so hands-on, really close to the people we're helping. I don't want us to become another big organization, detached from the very people we're trying to serve." Miles saw where she was coming from. They had both built this non-profit from the ground up, and they had always prided themselves on being involved in every aspect of it. "You're right," he said. "We started this because we wanted to make a real difference, not just in terms of numbers but in terms of relationships. We can't lose sight of that. But we also need to recognize that it's going to be harder to do everything ourselves as we grow. We have to trust our team, delegate, and keep our focus on the things that matter most. Emily sighed, running a hand through her hair. I know. It's just harder than I thought it would be. I want to make sure that we're still doing the work that's closest to our hearts while also being responsible for all this growth. Miles gave her a reassuring smile. We'll find a way. We just need to be strategic. We can focus on what we're best at, and we'll delegate the rest. That's how we'll stay true to our mission without burning out. Emily took another deep breath, feeling comforted by his words. You're right. I guess I just need to trust that we've built something strong enough to carry the weight. They spent the rest of the afternoon mapping out a new plan, one that focused on refocusing their core programs, ensuring that they were doing what they were best at while still expanding their impact. It wasn't an easy decision, but they both knew that they couldn't continue at their current pace without a strategy in place to keep their efforts sustainable. Over the next few weeks, they streamlined their operations, focusing on the most impactful programs and learning to trust their expanded team to manage other initiatives. They set clearer goals, delegated more responsibilities, and made time to reconnect with their supporters. By doing so, they were able to balance the growth of the organization with their original mission, staying close to the community they served while expanding their reach. One day, as they sat together in the office, looking over the improvements they had made, Emily smiled. I think we're finally getting the balance right, she said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Miles looked up at her and nodded. We've always been about making a real impact, he said, and now we're doing it without losing sight of what matters most. We've found a way to grow without losing ourselves. Emily's heart swelled with pride. They had worked so hard to get here, and while there would always be more challenges ahead, they were finally in a place where they felt confident in their path forward. The next few months brought new opportunities and challenges, but Emily and Miles felt more equipped to handle them. With their focus back on what truly mattered, they were able to continue growing their programs while keeping their core values intact. They knew that no matter what came next, they could handle it as long as they remained true to their mission. As the nonprofit continued to thrive, so did their partnership. Together, Emily and Miles had built something lasting, a legacy that would continue to make a real difference in the lives of the people they served. As the years passed, the nonprofit continued to evolve, growing steadily while maintaining the heart of its mission. Emily and Miles had built something truly special, and their partnership, both in business and in life, was stronger than ever. They had faced countless obstacles, from financial struggles to the pressures of rapid growth, but they had emerged more resilient each time. The careful balance they had struck between their values and their ambition had allowed them to expand their impact without losing sight of what mattered most, the people they were helping. Their work had begun to reach across state lines, and they were now being recognized as one of the most effective and compassionate nonprofits in the region. With this recognition came new challenges. They were asked to take on more significant projects, collaborate with even more influential partners, and expand their programs even further. The temptation to scale quickly was always there, but Emily and Miles had learned from their earlier mistakes. They knew that with each new opportunity, they had to assess whether it aligned with their core values and their long-term vision. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Emily and Miles sat down together in their office, reviewing the latest proposal from a major corporation interested in funding one of their programs. It was an exciting opportunity, one that could help them reach thousands more people, but as Emily read the fine print, she felt a familiar sense of unease. Miles, we need to talk, she said, her voice hesitant. Miles looked up, noticing the concern in her eyes. What's on your mind? He asked. Emily put the proposal down and took a deep breath. I don't know. This sounds great on the surface, but I'm worried we're heading into dangerous territory. The money is substantial, but it comes with a lot of control over how the program will be run. We've been here before, and I'm just not sure it's worth it if we lose our independence. Miles read through the proposal, his brow furrowing as he processed the terms. He knew what Emily meant. They had worked too hard to build their non-profit into something that truly reflected their values, and they couldn't risk compromising that for the sake of funding. I think you're right, he said finally. It's tempting, But if we take this money, we might end up losing the very thing that makes our programs successful, our autonomy and our direct connection to the people we serve. Emily nodded, feeling a weight lift from her chest. I'm glad you agree, she said, relieved that they were on the same page. We've built this from the ground up, and we've always said we want to make a difference, but we can't do that if we're just another cog in a corporate machine. Exactly, Miles replied, his voice firm. We'll keep looking for opportunities that align with our mission, ones that allow us to stay true to our values. The work we've done has already shown that we can succeed without compromising who we are. In the end, they chose not to take the offer, opting instead to continue seeking funding and partnerships that were more in line with their vision for the future. It wasn't the easy choice, but it was the right one. Their decision to remain steadfast in their values paid off. They found other, more suitable partners who shared their commitment to making a meaningful difference, and over time, their non-profit continued to flourish. Emily and Miles often reflected on their journey, marveling at how far they had come. They had built a successful organization that helped thousands of people, all while maintaining their integrity and staying true to the mission that had originally brought them together. They were proud of what they had accomplished, but they knew that the journey wasn't over. As they looked ahead, they saw new opportunities and challenges on the horizon. But now, more than ever, they felt confident in their ability to navigate whatever came their way. The lessons they had learned, the mistakes they had made, and the successes they had achieved had all shaped them into leaders who knew the value of staying true to their purpose. Their non-profit had become a beacon of hope and change in the community, and Emily and Miles knew they would continue to be the driving force behind it, always remembering the people they had set out to help. Together, they were ready for whatever the future held, confident in the knowledge that they had built something that was truly meaningful, a legacy of positive change that would last for generations to come.